to Real Health with me, Karl Henry. Folks, today on the podcast, we are joined by Orla Drumgoole, the woman behind the new cookbook, Irish Mammy Cooks, to talk about Irish home cooking and lots more. We explore how traditional recipes can be comforting and accessible, and how food connects us to family and memories, and how Orla has turned her love of cooking into a cookbook, a huge social media platform that celebrates Irish culinary heritage. Orla, welcome to Real Health.
Hi, Karl. It's lovely to finally meet you. I spent so long talking to you about that bloody fridge. I'm so jealous. But we won't talk about
We've
that.
Chatted
today.
online, though. My listeners know all about the fridge love. We've chatted online a good bit, and it is lovely to have you in on a very momentous day for you.
Absolutely.
You've been all around Dublin City. You've been signing books. You've been doing radio interviews.
And it's, I mean, I used to teach English, so this is like media studies 101, but like in real time. And I'm kind of thinking, I wish I could bring this back to the classroom, but I'm gone from the classroom. So
it's an exciting day.
It's absolutely, and it's just like, it's blown my mind, I have to say. I love Gill. I love all things Irish. They're an Irish company, and I taught for 35 years and used their English books. I actually used all Gill books. I fought for them every year in the staff room. I used to say, no, I like the Gill ones, and they have a particularly good set of wellbeing books, because wellbeing was one of the subjects I taught for the last 10 years and was passionate about.
How does one go from school, teaching English, to one of the biggest Irish culinary Instagram and social media platforms, to a cookbook? How does that journey happen?
I have no idea, because I started the blog 5 years ago with a photograph, and it was a photograph of a burger that I had made, and it kind of went from there. And then about maybe 6 months or 7 months later, I'd kind of gained 2,000 followers, which I thought was wild. And a nephew said, but Orla, there's something missing. It's you. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, Karl, because I taught English, and the thing I used to teach and used to be really passionate about was people writing personally, so having a personal voice. And, you know, I listened to the department giving out about, you know, everything is rote learning. English was never rote learning. It's all about the personal voice. And so I thought, okay. So then I kind of started doing little voiceovers, and then, even though I was still grey-haired at the time, I took the plunge and I appeared on screen. And so many of my followers said, your hair is lovely. And I hated it. I just hated it being grey. So did Mam, actually. But I just went online one day, and then it kind of started growing from there. And then I posted an apple and custard tray bake, and I got, I don't know how many thousand followers from that.
That was the one.
And
there's always one reel that kind of goes.
Yeah, and then it's kind of, people just love tray bakes, and then they associated me with tray bakes. And although, as I said, I do dinners and I do other things too, but that's how it happened. And it just kind of grew legs, and I have no idea, because I'm terrible at business. I have no grounding in it. I have no background in it. I have no marketing experience. I just have passion. And I have a passion for teaching people, and it's what I'm doing still. So I went from the classroom to Instagram, and I'm still doing the same job.
Does it
teaching.
Scare you, the scope of your reach?
Yeah, it's funny, you know, people say, oh my God, you'll get 1 million followers. And I thought, oh no. I taught in a smaller school, so our school had only about 500 students, St. Louis and Dundalk. And I loved that, because it was small enough to be personal, and yet big enough that you didn't feel like you were in, you know, a fishbowl all the time. And I kind of really like the fact that I can still connect with people, and people send me a DM and I get to see it, that I don't have so many thousands of them that they get lost in the ether. So I don't know how big I wanted to get, because I think you lose something with the big, but at the same time, I don't know. I have to kind of, you know something, I'm retired a year on the 28th of February, and this was never the plan for that. Never the plan for that. And
when you opened the cookbook for the first time, opening your own book is a very special, somewhat scary moment, but it's a very special moment.
It's just, you know, somebody said, when did you get excited about it? And I said, yesterday. Because I actually didn't believe that it was real. And I got the book on a Friday, and you're a Gill person yourself, so you know, you get 12 copies of the book. And I went, oh, they came in a box. Oh, I'll have to put it in an envelope and then do the, you know, let's open my book. And then I went, I don't want to look at it before I do that. And then I just couldn't not look at it. So actually it arrived on Friday morning, and I opened the box. I left it in the hall, because my house is a mess. In the hall, never took the box out of the hall, but took one book out. And I actually sat with it for the whole weekend, between me and Paddy on the couch. And I just opened it and I looked at it. And it was actually quite overwhelming to think, oh God, this is mine. I did this. Um, because I suppose when you're a mother, you big up your children, you tell them how wonderful they are. You grow up in a different time. Like when I grew up, I'm nearly 60. No, I'm only nearly 59. But we grew up in a time where, you didn't let children hear that they were great. So you would be quite self-deprecating. And it's funny, it's a thing that one of my sisters says, don't do that to yourself. So it is actually quite hard to not do that and to actually go, oh my God, you're brilliant. You've done this. And I mean, as I'm saying it to you, I'm actually feeling that emotion because genuinely it is an amazing thing. If it was somebody else's book, I'd say, you're incredible. So
That idea of challenging self-talk, it is something that generationally we struggle with. And I would put myself into your generation,
yeah,
like 40s, people who are now 40, 50, 60, 70.
yeah,
We're poor at that. Though I'm, well done me. I've done the self kind
yes, yeah.
to be okay with being proud of something and to be emotionally connected that I've done well and I produced something of quality. Where the younger generation are much better at that now.
They are much better. And it's interesting, I was chatting to Kate today as we were walking up here and I was saying, it's funny, my children, I have always told them how amazing they are because I will get emotional thinking about the incredible children that Paddy and I have. They are just amazing. 3 girls. We are so lucky and they're so wonderful. And actually, Fanula, my eldest girl, said to me one day, she said, Mum, it's hard sometimes when we hear you telling us how wonderful we are, when we don't hear you saying the same about you, because that's a kind of a funny message for us to receive. And it does actually stop you in your tracks and you think, okay, I need to not do that. So I think, yeah, that's been an interesting journey. And yeah, it's just, I mean, I've been so love bombed for the last few days with the launch last night. And I mean, it's incredible. So I think we need to do less of that knocking and more of that praise and not just teach our younger generation to do it, but to kind of do it to ourselves as well.
And it's a great message and example of people at any stage in life that you can kind of do anything you want to do.
I just
Be a
think,
social media sensation or
yes,
whatever it may be. You can,
I think it's incredible to start again. And I suppose I knew Paddy is 10 years older than me. So he retired 6 years ago. And I knew when he retired that I wanted to retire as soon as I could so that I could spend time with him because, what are you working for if not to be with the people you love? So it was always the plan to retire, but I kind of had a terror. Mum didn't retire until the last day she had to. She was 66 because she was afraid that she would be bored when she retired. And I kind of had the same fear. So I was sort of doing the blog thing just to kind of keep that going. And then it suddenly became a completely different thing. It's become a business. It's become a book. It's become all of this that's happening. And it's wonderful. And actually, I have a sister who 10 years ago, her daughter was going to college and she said to her daughter, gosh, you're so lucky. Do what you want to do because I didn't know when I was 18 what I wanted and I would love to have done psychology. And Aisling said, no, this is my sister.
Okay.
And Aisling said, but Mum, why don't you do it now? And she said, oh, I don't know. And she did. And 10 years on, she got her clinical doctorate last December. So, I mean, I'm in a family of women who have shown me the way because Sinead pursued that dream and took 10 years to do it. And so I'm just following in her footsteps.
And that sense of time and connection and the importance of that phase of your life, food is intrinsically linked to that, isn't it? For you, like food, that it brings people together. It connects us emotionally,
Absolutely.
physically, every which way.
Well, I think if I think about families, so there are 40 in my immediate family. Yeah, there are 9 children. Mum and Dad had 9 of us and 40 of us. And we don't ever go out because where do you go to get a restaurant that will take 40? And apart from anything else, where do you go that you can afford to take 40 out? And they're all different age groups. Mm-hmm. So my youngest grandniece was one last night. We sang Happy Birthday at the launch tour. And then my brothers are older than me. So my brother is almost the same age as Paddy. So it's like a huge number of people. And so we never went out. As children, it wasn't a thing. Like we used to go out once a year on a holiday to Spain or France. Mum and Dad used to take us camping. And one day we'd go out for dinner, and the rest of the time we had soup and salads and, cooked meats and things in the campsite. And we went out once, and we used to go to the cafes attached to the petrol stations, which sounds terrible, but like they had
at the
things
time,
like pigeon and goat and rabbit, and Mammy would always try the exotic stuff, and Dad would say, I'll have pork chop and chips. Or steak and chips. That was Dad's thing always, and Mam's was always, we'll try the octopus. And you'd be going, no, Mammy, you can try the octopus. We're with Dad. So food was just the thing that brought us together. And I think it is for every Irish family. It is about eating together and breaking bread and just that sense of community and connection with each other.
And that's kind of, that drives, or that appears through your Instagram account and now into the book. It's probably one of your differentiators, I think, as a culinary brand, which I can call you now. That it's old school. It's balancing kind of old school recipes with slightly modern twists and simple additions or changes.
And I suppose it's about not making it all about the process, because for me, the food making isn't the thing. The end result is what I want, which is that people come together and people eat together and people enjoy each other's company and they taste nice food. But it shouldn't be that you have sweated blood and tears over this and you're in the kitchen all day and that you can't talk to anybody because you've just got that to do and that's your focus. That is a means to an end, and the end is the part that is the most beautiful part. It is that gathering around the table, whether it is a sit-down meal or whether it is, standing up buffet style. I like buffet style in my house because of the configuration of the house. And actually that, I suppose, for me is my favourite part of the book. Well, I think for me, the gathering is the most important one because that's the bit, because I come from a family of 40, Karl, everybody in my family caters for 40. So at Easter time, I do Easter in my house. Sinead does a barbecue at the end of the summer in her house. Barry does New Year's in his house. And you'd be disappointed when you've only 18. I remember saying to somebody, someone said, have you anyone for Easter? And I said, yeah, we've only 25 this year. And the poor girl at school nearly died. And she said, 20, you're feeding? And I said, yeah, they'll be there now from Saturday night till probably Monday afternoon.
God, okay.
And she was agog and aghast at that. And I said, yeah, but that's just what we do. And I suppose you don't realise when it's natural to you that that's a skill. And I thought that's what I want people to take from this. So there's a whole chapter called The Gathering, and it's about everybody's different way of doing. So Sinead and Aisling in Dublin have a terraced house, beautiful, but they can feed 30 at a table. And they have all the table lined up. They have the double doors open into the sitting room. Small house, but it fits 30 people. 3-course meal, sit down, done. Another house, Barry and Mary Lou in Blackrock, they have a marquee that their neighbours, between them 10 houses, bought. And so they share that around. So there are all sorts of different things in there, but it's making that accessible. So you work out what works for you. And if you do not like cooking on the day, then you do something that you wouldn't cook on the day. If you love cooking on the day, do a barbecue, because then you can be the centre of the attention. You can have everybody chatting to you around the barbecue. In our house, I do a lasagna or I do a curry, or other people do beef bourguignon. So everybody has their strength in it. And I think it's that notion of doing things that suit you, prepping ahead and knowing that, yeah, I've got this under control because I have 2 tray bakes made that are in the freezer from last week, and the starters are cut up. I love the little fresh veg starters, but you can cut them up the day before and store them in the fridge and they stay fresh. And so it's little tips and things like that, because I think that's what scares people off. And then you have all these people saying, I couldn't get a caterer for the communion, and they're having conniptions, and you're going,
for 10 people.
Yeah. What's a caterer? Do it yourself. Oh, I couldn't. So it's empowering.
That would impact your values, I think. Getting a caterer in for that, for you, it's such an intrinsic part of family. And
yeah, but I'd be kind of thinking, like Mammy would say, but that's so expensive. And I'd be thinking, I can spend that on my dress instead, or on something else, Yes, but it's not even about the money, Karl. It's, for me also, it is about the gift of giving love. People always said to me, would you not go into, you'll retire and you'll set up a little bakery, or you'll do cooking on the side. And I said, are you kidding? I will not. They said, but why? And I said, because there's a difference between what you cook out of love and what you cook as a business. And I do genuinely think that.
Do you struggle with that now?
No, because
You
everything
have
I
a
cook.
business.
No, because I don't sell any food. So I made you stuff today, but I made that because, and
We
someone
had
said,
shortbread and we had brownies, and they were absolutely amazing.
But-
A very happy production team.
yeah, but people said, but why did you do that? And I said, because that's what I do.
Yep.
I feed people and I bring food. And as somebody said to me, it's your love language. It definitely is, because I just think it's such a comforting thing. And I think sometimes there are negative connotations around it, and I think there shouldn't be. It is the bringer together of us all, you know.
You're like the chocolatier in Chocolat, the Johnny Depp movie.
Oh, I know the movie. Yeah, nothing like that. Thank you so much.
Juliette Binoche. I had a total
Yes.
crush on her when I watched it.
There you
But
go.
anyway,
God, I'll look at her again and go, Jesus, Carl thinks I'm like, oh, wow.
but that graw, that real, that love language of food,
Yeah.
you can really get that from chatting to you.
But that's what Mam gave us. Like,
Yeah.
Mam, she'd kill us for stuff. And she was a primary teacher. Dad was in the army. And I mean, there are two disciplinarians. And like, there were 9 of us, and Mam lost 3 children at a very early age. So she was a tough woman. I remember when Dad died, she never cried. And I said to her, Mam, it's okay to cry over Dad. And she said, no, I can't. And I said, why? And she said, because if I started, I'd never stop. And so she was tough. And sometimes, you know, we weren't huggers when we were small. And then we became huggers because we were all huggers. And it was so funny when you'd hug Mam, she kind of go, didn't know how to do that. So she didn't hug us, but she fed us. And so every Sunday we had apple tart, and she made like 100 Kearney buns. I was in trouble for calling them buns, not scones. And she made brown bread, either in, very rarely the loaf. She always made them in like brown buns, a rectangular one. But that was just always the way that she kind of connected with us in some ways, I suppose.
So you've phenomenal memories attached.
Yeah.
Food. I remember I don't have a great memory for things, but one is my dad's parents used to make sausage stew.
Oh, wow.
Coddle, is it coddle?
Don't talk to me about coddle.
And that was her there was once a week it was like sausage stewed, and to this day I can remember I can remember the taste of it. I can remember it gives me that same, or you would guess it from the connection with your mum providing the food. I can remember that.
And did you like the taste of it?
I loved it.
Oh my God, because everybody keeps
loved
saying
it.
make coddle. I'm going to make it sometime soon.
Oh, it was fabulous.
Oh, okay, right. I will make it so. But I bet they didn't fry the sausages first. I can't
No.
look at them when they're not fried. I just can't do it.
I get it was amazing. Like, they were inner city dubs, and like it was just, oh my God, it was like, and in conjunction with that was Fish Friday. So
Yes.
myself and my granddad used to walk up the East Wall Road past the church
wow.
to the Italian chippers that was on the corner,
Yeah.
which is now gone. Get the fish and chips, walk back into the parlour. Everyone that was there would have the fish and chips, because that's just what you did on a Friday.
Yeah.
And again, I can vividly remember the walk.
Yeah, that's
I
lovely.
can remember walking beside. It's the most vivid memory I have of both my grandparents is that.
Wow.
And they're both food connected through food and through the
Yeah.
emotion that and the gathering that brought.
Well, you see, Mam was from West Cork, so she was from a place called Affadown.
Okay.
And it's hilarious because Kate, my publicist, said, oh, my mum was born in a place in West Cork called Skibbereen. And
Yep.
I said, 6 miles from where my mother was born. Small Irish world, I love it.
Sure.
But we used to go down to Tragumna Beach.
I know it.
It's beautiful. But every summer we used to go with the cousins. So there were 9 of us, and there were 6 or 8 of them. God, sorry, O'Neill's in West Cork. I can't remember how many of you there were. But then there'd be cousins from Killarney would come as well, and there'd be cousins from Butlerstown. And Dad would buy like
I live
a
near
box.
Butlerstown, I know it.
Yeah, well, Dad would buy a box of, the Maxi Twist, the Maxi Cup ice creams. Oh my God, I have such memories of that. I tried to buy one for Fanula. Her first step into the water when she was born, she was 3 months old, was in Tragumna.
Okay.
Because I needed to bring her there. I said, oh, we just don't have the Maxi Twist cup that Dad would buy, because that was the memory all my cousins have of my dad, that he was the man who bought all those ice creams. And it's so linked to everything in our lives, I think.
And you bring that, as I said, you bring that through with you through social media, now through your book, that idea of connection, of graw, of matching the kind of comforting recipes with slightly more challenging things for people. Are you surprised by people's inability to cook?
I was reading somewhere, someone was talking about the 80s where everything was, instant. I remember crying because Mammy wouldn't give us instant whip. And you know that ad for mash gets smashed?
Oh,
Do you
yeah.
remember that?
Yeah.
That, like, I just wanted smash. And I thought, we just have potatoes. So there was that whole phase in the 80s where we went through all of those artificial foods. And like I was saying, I used to be so jealous of my friends who used to have, white bread sandwiches for lunch because I had this bloody brown bread thing. And now I look back and I'm in my 50s and I think, oh my God, how lucky were we that we had food that you made from scratch and there was no concern about anything. You didn't have to read the labels and you didn't have to check the calories. You just ate proper, ordinary food. And there's nothing that's bad for you or good for you. Everything in moderation is fine. And I think that is really important nowadays to get that message out as well. And when you make it from scratch, you know what's in it. Now, I will say, I don't make my gravy from scratch. And I did cook beef last Sunday. And
I've never made gravy from scratch.
Well, I said, okay, I'll make gravy from scratch because they're all saying, oh, what kind of gravy do you make? So I said I'd make it from scratch. And then I looked at it and I went, Jesus, that looks desperate. And I got 3 cubes of my Christmas gravy and I stuck them into it because that was made with Bisto. And it was yummy gravy. But so there are some things I don't mind, we kind of cheat on. But but it's that thing making from ingredients you have at home and looking in the fridge and saying, not quite as beautiful as your fridge.
You're going to treat yourself to a new fridge now, are you?
I'll have to.
You've had that chat a couple of times on Instagram.
Carl, I'm not being funny. If the people whose fridge you own want to give me a fridge, I swear to God, I'll post about it every day because I love it.
I bought mine because people always ask me that. I think it gets sponsored. Like, no, I bought it. We bought it.
It is, but it's the most incredible fridge because I have a double door American fridge, but it just isn't big enough. I actually bought all the containers.
Oh, did you?
Yeah,
okay.
I did, and then I fired them out because I said this just does not work the same as Carl's fridge. It doesn't look like his fridge, and I love the drawers in the freezer.
Oh yeah.
Because everything is easy to find, but
simple.
What
3 things would you like people to take from our chat? Obviously, before you can answer, I'll answer for you. One is to buy your book, which I think people should do. They should support you in the fact that you're not just selling a book, you're selling something far bigger than that, I think. You're selling something that is passion, but also that connection from food to emotion to family, the gathering idea. Like there's a big societal impact of a book like this. From a food perspective, what would you like people to take from our chat? We haven't chatted much about food, which I love, because I think it's that kind of life lessons ep. You've had a very interesting life, but also getting to establish why is this person put a book together? Why is this person's Instagram going so well? And I think from listening, people will get that because they've got to know you a little bit now. Yeah. And to get to understand you a little bit.
I don't know what 3 things I'd like people to take from it. That's a hard question, Carl.
It is, isn't it?
Yeah, it is.
I could ask for one. That's even harder.
I don't know. I suppose, I think for me, why did I write the book and why do I have the blog? Because many years ago, I was going to be a singer and Mum and Dad said, okay, just do the H-dip so you've got something to fall back on, because you had to have something to fall back on, because let's be honest, singing is not exactly a career. Although I have a child doing violin and one doing viola. Paddy said, are they ever going to be off the books? I said, I don't know, dear. Hopefully. But they did say, do the dip. And the first day I taught, it was a complete and utter disaster. I mean, it was a complete disaster. Everything that could possibly go wrong went wrong. And I came home and Mum was in the kitchen cooking, funnily enough, where you often have the best chats. And I think that's the thing about this cooking too. Like, the book is called Irish Mammy Cooks, but it's not that the mammy is doing the cooking. This is about the creating those memories and teaching your child to do these things with you. And I remember talking to her for about an hour and a half. And at the end of it, I just told her all the things that went wrong and then what I was going to fix the next day, because it was a school that taught on a Saturday. And at the end of it, she just looked at me and she said, And I said, what? And she said, and you don't think you're a teacher? And in that instant, I knew I'm a teacher. And I'm still a teacher, Carl. And for me, it's easy to teach H1 children. That's what it's called nowadays. It used to be the A's in my day. But I mean, it's easy to teach a child who's going to get a H1 because they are driven. They very often have family behind them who are driving them and helping them and supporting them. It's really hard to teach the child who succeeds by getting 30% on a test. And it breaks your heart that you have to write fail on that test. So to go from that to getting 30% and that power that you have, and actually I do think teachers have so much power because we are a power for good or bad in a child's life. We can be the best thing that happens to them, or we can be the absolute worst. And for me, that's really powerful and really important. And then the blog, it's the very same thing. Like, I get messages from 70-year-old women who say, thank you so much. I was never the baker in my house. My sister was. So she made the cakes after my mammy died. But this year, I made a Christmas cake from your recipe for the first time ever. And I just think, oh my God, that's a woman in America who sent that message. And for me, that is like, that's the most amazing thing. And I just love that.
You're asking people to take the leap.
Yeah, and not be afraid, and to believe that they can do anything. And that's the thing about it. It's like teaching children who find it difficult to learn. It's just that you haven't been shown how to do it in a way that is accessible. And that's, I suppose, the thing about it, that cooking is accessible to everybody. And there are a few recipes in there that I say, okay, if you want to do this, it's like batten down the hatches. It's going to take you 3.5 hours, but it's worth there's an Italian gatto. Oh my God, it's a vegetarian recipe, and it is the loveliest thing I've ever eaten. And somebody mentioned it to me recently, one of the family, and I said, I'm going to make it for Easter. And they said, no, you don't have to. I said, oh no, I'll be so happy. Mm-hmm. Now I have the book. I don't have to screenshot it.
Of course, yeah.
Which is great. But I mean, I really like that. So there are things that are complex, but there's so much that's accessible, you know?
Amazing. The best of luck with the book.
Thank you so much.
Because one of the key things when we bring authors in, and they've done lots of different interviews, it's lovely to, we chatted about this before we came on air, so everyone has a different angle. Every interviewer has a different angle. And for me, it's people. People are fascinating, and the book is the product of all of life and that emotion, that connection. The book is the product of that. And the best of luck with it. So the book is called Irish Mammy Cooks.
The Irish Mammy Cooks cookbook.
Cookbook, and your Instagram handle
is the same. It's just Irish Mammy Cooks, and it's Facebook as well, actually. I'm on TikTok, but I'm terrible at it, so don't bother.
I don't like TikTok. I just, no.
Well, I wasn't on it for a long time because I was teaching still, and I didn't want, the students would have been on TikTok. And I also find it's just sort of quite a toxic place sometimes.
It absolutely is.
It really is. And I just think Instagram and Facebook are far kinder, you know, and I just think...
They're nicer places to hang out.
Much nicer places, you know.
Well, the best of luck with everything. And it's great to finally meet you.
Absolutely.
I hope the book goes to number one. You told me before you came on air, it's flying out off the shelves already, which is no major surprise because you deserve it. So very well done, and congratulations
so much,
on the book. Folks, I really hope you enjoyed today's episode of Real Health with me, Karl Henry. As ever, you know where we are, Karl Henry PT on Instagram. realhealth@independent.ie is our email address. If you liked what you heard, don't forget to rate and review. We'll see you next week for more Real Health. Slán go fóill.